Hello and welcome back to English with Jack. It is wonderful to have you here as we continue our journey toward mastering natural, fluent English. My goal is to help you understand how English is spoken in the real world, rather than just in textbooks. Today, we have a story titled The Difficult Conversation. Through this narrative, you will learn specific vocabulary related to workplace communication and, most importantly, understand the true meaning of the idiom "beat around the bush." This lesson is perfect for those wanting to improve their professional vocabulary and listening skills. Graham stared at the analog clock on the wall of his office. The second hand ticked loudly in the quiet room, seemingly mocking him with every passing moment. It was a grey, rainy Tuesday in Manchester, and the weather perfectly matched his somber mood. Graham was the branch manager of a small logistics company, a role he usually enjoyed because he liked organizing teams and solving problems. However, today was different. Today, he had to speak to Gina. Gina was one of his longest-serving employees, a dedicated worker who never arrived late and always kept her desk tidy. Unfortunately, recent budget cuts from the head office meant that the company had to restructure the department. Graham knew exactly what he had to say, but the thought of actually saying the words made his stomach turn. He had spent the entire morning finding distractions to delay the inevitable. First, he spent 20 minutes reorganizing the color-coded files on his computer desktop, a task that was entirely unnecessary. Then he went to the staff kitchen to make a cup of tea, chatting aimlessly with the receptionist about the football results from the weekend and the terrible traffic on the motorway. He was doing everything he could to avoid the main task. He was, as the saying goes, beating around the bush. He simply did not want to face the reality of the situation. He returned to his desk and sighed heavily. His mobile phone buzzed on the table, but he ignored it. He looked through the glass partition of his office. He could see the lift doors opening at the end of the corridor. Gina stepped out, shaking her umbrella and smiling at a colleague. Graham's heart rate increased. He realized he could not hide in his office forever. He opened his paper diary and pretended to check his schedule, though he knew it was empty. It was time.
Graham cleared his throat and finally called Gina into his office. She walked in with her usual cheerful demeanor, clutching a notepad and a pen, ready for work instructions. "Take a seat, Gina," Graham said, gesturing to the chair opposite his desk. He sat down and immediately started rearranging the pens on his desk, avoiding direct eye contact. He asked her if she wanted a biscuit or a glass of water, trying to delay the conversation for just a few more seconds. Gina politely declined and waited for him to speak. Instead of addressing the restructuring, Graham started talking about the office plants. He mentioned that the fern in the corner looked a bit dry and asked if she thought they needed a new watering schedule. Gina looked slightly confused, but played along, nodding her head slowly. Graham then shifted the topic to the upcoming summer holidays. He asked if she had booked any flights, or if she planned to stay in the UK this year. "I might go to Cornwall," Gina replied briefly. Graham seized this opportunity to tell a long, winding story about a camping trip he took to Cornwall 10 years ago. He described the tent, the rain, and the bad fish and chips he had eaten near the harbour. He was waffling completely. He knew he was wasting time, yet he could not stop himself. The air in the room grew heavy with tension. Gina shifted in her seat, her smile fading.
She sensed that this was not a casual chat about holidays or office plants. She could tell that Graham was anxious, but she did not know why he wouldn't just say what was on his mind.
Finally, Graham paused to take a breath. The silence stretched out between them. He looked at his hands and mumbled something about the economy being difficult. He mentioned that the head office in London was reviewing many policies. He was hinting at the problem, dancing around the issue, but still refusing to be direct. He was hoping that perhaps Gina would guess the news so he wouldn't have to say it explicitly. It was an awkward display of avoidance, and the atmosphere in the small office became increasingly uncomfortable. Gina furrowed her brow, waiting for the point of the meeting to finally be revealed. Gina took a deep breath and decided to put an end to the charade. She leaned forward, resting her hands on the desk, and looked Graham directly in the eyes. "Graham," she said, softly but firmly, "please stop beating around the bush. You have been talking about camping and ferns for 10 minutes. Just tell me what is going on." Graham stopped mid-sentence. He felt his face flush red with embarrassment. He realized that his attempt to soften the blow had only caused more anxiety. He nodded slowly, appreciating her directness. He sat up straight and finally let the truth come out. He explained that due to the budget cuts from the head office, her department was being restructured. He told her that whilst she was not losing her job, she would be transferred to a different team on the ground floor, and her responsibilities would change significantly. Once the words were spoken, the tension in the room evaporated instantly. It was as if a balloon had been popped. Gina listened carefully to the details. She did not scream or shout. In fact, she seemed relieved to simply know the truth rather than guessing. She asked a few practical questions about her new contract and the timeline for the move. They spent the next 10 minutes discussing the logistics of the transition professionally and calmly. Graham realized that the anticipation of the conversation had been far worse than the reality. By trying to avoid the subject, he had wasted time and created unnecessary stress for both of them. As Gina left the office to return to her desk, Graham felt a massive weight lift off his shoulders. He made a silent promise to himself that, in the future, he would always be direct and honest rather than beating around the bush. And that is where we leave Graham and Gina for today. I hope you enjoyed following their story in the office. It was interesting to see how Graham tried so hard to avoid the difficult topic, only to find that Gina preferred honesty all along. Remember, the key phrase from this lesson was "beat around the bush," which Graham demonstrated perfectly by talking about the weather and his holiday instead of the restructuring news. If you found this lesson helpful and want to improve your British English further, please do hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. It really helps me create more content for you. Thanks for listening, and I will see you in the next lesson.